Howdy, folks. Mr. Reardon here. This lesson is going to walk you through some strategies for reading visual sources when they appear on the AP English Language Synthesis question. So, I'm asking everyone to take some notes on this presentation. I don't always require you to take uh, notes, like to write down exactly what I'm saying in my lessons and turn those in. But for this lesson, I am asking for that. So please see Schoology for the link to make your own copy of the notes so you can take them. Or if you're not my student, you can look in the description of the YouTube video and you'll be able to pull up a copy of the notes as well if you'd like to take them. In Schoology this year, the notes document, I believe, is labeled 35.2 and is in the Unit 6 Week 14 folder. So, some context for this lesson. Accompanying every AP Lang synthesis prompt, as you well know, are 6 to 8 sources from which you will be drawing evidence, and also sometimes some ideas for your evidence and reasoning, or for your explanation and reasoning to build your argument on the topic or um, on the question presented in the synthesis prompt. Most of the sources that you get, the 6 to 8 sources, are text. They're articles, letters, blog posts, historical documents. We spent a lot of time first semester on the close reading of text, we will spend more time focused specifically on reading and thinking about and pulling evidence from these print texts, the texts in words. And so we don't need to focus on that right now. I think it actually makes more sense for us to start with the visual texts and then circle back to the more traditional printed word texts. You can expect around 2 of the sources in a single synthesis prompt. Like when you get one prompt plus 6 to 8 sources, you can expect 2 of them roughly to be visual rather than text-based sources. It might be 1, it might be 3, could even be 4, but 2, I think, is a decent thing you should go into a decent number you should go into the AP exam with. Visual sources in past years' synthesis prompts have included all of the following: political cartoons, photographs, advertisements, posters, prints of paintings, charts, and tables that present data, and scans of physical objects like pennies and textbook covers. So here's the idea. Extra steps are required to get claims and information from the sources that you can then use in written arguments. When you're working with like printed word texts in prose, it's easy for you to just grab a piece of the text and plug it into your argument, as long as you know what you're going to argue and what kind of evidence you need in order to make that argument, which is the work of an outline. But if you don't, but you can't do that with a visual source. You have to take what you're looking at, the visual source that's being presented to you, and turn it into words that you can then build into your argument. And so I'm going to give you some strategies today for doing that. The skill you need to know here, the skill of distilling ideas from visual sources is very widely applicable. It's not just a very specific thing to AP English language synthesis questions. This is something you can do once you know how to do it. You will never unlearn how to do it, and it's something you can do in synthetic research across the disciplines forever. In college and beyond. Doing so is sophisticated and compelling, and something that you might even grow to enjoy doing, because it adds to the knowledge of everyone when a person is bringing together visual sources with print sources, expressing different ideas on a topic in order to make a novel argument on that topic. So in order for you to successfully extract the ideas and information you need from visual sources, and then use them in a synthesis question, you need this really helpful tool called the explicit implicit diagram, or the EI diagram. I will say EI diagram often. It's just a little bit easier. So before I explain to you what the EI diagram is, we're going to go off on a tiny tangent. We're going to have a Latin moment. Cue fun sound effect that I don't have. So the Latin prefix ex means out or outside of. The Latin prefix in means within or inside of. And the Latin word root ply or plic means to fold. So if you look at these two words, explicit and implicit, you can pull them apart. The ending part is like, it just indicates that it's a kind of noun. You can ignore it. All that really matters for the meaning is the prefix and the root. And so if you look at the word explicit, you can see you have outside of, out or outside of, and fold. So it's like the information or ideas that are folded on the outside, that are folded without some kind of text or image. So it's what is on the outside. It's what's obvious. It's what you can see. For implicit, it's the opposite. So you've got the ply there to fold, but preceding that you have within or inside of. So it is the ideas that are folded within, that are buried in, that you have to dig out, that you have to like unpack and unfold out of the image or diagram in order to really see and understand them thoroughly. So what these two things mean are right there in the words. The Latin helps you to access that. You don't really need any more notes on this slide because I just explained to you what they mean, but I'm going to give you more anyway to make sure it's even clearer to you. So on this side of an explicit implicit diagram, on the left-hand side, you need to include what is explicit, folded without, in the image. What's going on in the image? Just state what's happening as objectively as possible. What do you see? Or for data, take the numbers and turn them into a backed sentence. Blank percent of blank does blank, right? Or blank percent more blank does blank than blank, right? Something like that. Just take the numbers that you see in the diagram and turn it into a sentence that expresses evidence-based fact. Don't make any inferences on the explicit side, not even a little bit, right? It needs to be just objectively what's there in the source based on what you're looking at. Any kind of inference or any kind of thinking about what it might mean goes on the right-hand side. If you're ever unsure, like does it go on the left side or the right side, you can ask, or you can just put it on the right side. That is a general rule of thumb for this tool. Like put it on the right side if you're not sure. Leave the explicit stuff. Only what you know is like, this is what's in the image. It's totally incontrovertible. That's what's going on in the image, or that's what the data is showing on the graph. For the implicit side, the question is, what do you think this part of the source means or intends to suggest? Your goal here is to extract a claim or information from the source. It could be a claim of fact, claim of value, claim of policy, doesn't matter. Claims can support either side of a binary argument. Remember that a single visual source, could have some information that supports one side of an argument and some information that supports the other side of the argument. Both could be represented in the same source. The sources are not one-sided. You can also include questions on the implicit side of the diagram. So if you're just like, maybe that means blank, or I wonder why blank, right? Those kinds of things can also go in the implicit side. You can even sometimes turn those into rhetorical questions when you're writing your essay, which is a particularly sophisticated thing to do. Going from, something in the background of a painting to rhetorical question, tying off a paragraph like that. That move is very advanced. So please know again that sources can make many claims, but often you are going to see, especially in the case of things that are explicitly political, you're going to see that there are claims that you can extract from what you see that are like the most important claims, or the most significant, the most salient claims in that visual source. Please know as well, material you can use as evidence can come from either side. You could say, this is what's in the image, right? Or this is what's in the painting, or this is what's in the photograph, and use that itself as evidence to make your argument. Or you can say, this evidence suggest the what I'm seeing in this photo suggests this, or is arguing this, and then the fact that that thing is being argued or suggested is your evidence, and you continue with your explanation and reasoning, maybe roping in another source. So you can use either side as evidence itself, but if you are trying to further your explanation and reasoning, you need to pull only from the implicit side of the diagram. You can't be pulling like what's there in the image. That's not really going to help you with your explanation and reasoning. You need to be pulling from the implicit side when building explanation and reasoning out of a visual source, or when relying on a visual source for your evidence. Alrighty, so first example. For all these examples, I'm going to give you a fictional prompt. I wrote these fictional prompts. They may not actually be 100% reflective of what would actually be on the AP exam, but I thought they were kind of interesting and worth your time to think about. I'm also going to give you a little text preceding the source. So on the actual AP exam, if you go back and look at those all the released prompts, you're going to see before any visual source, there's usually like a line of text in italics that just gives you a teeny bit of general context for like, what is this image? What's it showing? So I will give you that as well. So I'm going to ask you to read the prompt as well as this little bit of text preceding the source, and then spend some time looking at this visual source. Pause the video, think about it. In the space provided in your notes, I want you to try doing 2 or 3 bullets on the right-hand side and for the explicit, right? What do you see? 2 or 3 bullets on the right hand, or on the on the right hand side. What is implicit? What is being suggested, or what kind of claims are being made in the image? Pause the video, do that right now. Come back to it in a few minutes. I will go over the answers with you, or at least what I think the answers might be. Alrighty. So for this one, well, we've got a small person standing next to a red, white, and blue sign that reads, "Vote here." The "Vote here" sign is sitting above the entrance to a maze with lots of twists, turns, and dead ends. Note here, I'm just saying what's in the image. I'm not doing any kind of inference or jumping to any kind of conclusions yet. Just what is there. I'm turning it into words. The look on the person's face could be either confused or overwhelmed. That's human emotional expressions are fairly universal, at least within a culture. That's a confused face. It's an overwhelmed face. Um, I think it makes sense to put that under explicit. On the other end of the maze is a voting booth. The maze is red and it's shaped like a sort of cartoon elephant. So now for the implicit side, we did some things for the explicit side. Now for the implicit side. So red, white, and blue, as well as the act of voting, are associated with patriotism and civic duty in the USA. So we have some like clear American, American patriotism messaging going on in here. The maze would be pretty difficult to navigate. That's we've got a claim of fact there. It seems to represent obstacles to voting that many Americans face. Maybe there would be some other sources in a prompt uh, on this topic that would, use text, maybe articles, blog posts, that kind of thing, that would say some things about what those obstacles might actually be. So there's a nice opportunity to connect to other sources there. The person I'm getting from the look on the person's face that they might feel confused or overwhelmed by what they have to do in order to be a patriot and in order to exercise their right to vote, a right that they may treasure. Now, the creator of the image is clearly laying blame for obstacles on the Republican political party in the United States. This is right. There's pretty clear claim here. The Republican Party, now whether you agree with this or not is irrelevant. This is the claim being made by the cartoon. The Republican Party is responsible for putting obstacles in the way of people exercising their right to vote. That's the claim. So this is I made this orange here because I think it gives you this is really the core of how this image or how this visual source could contribute to the overall argument. To what extent would instituting a way for Americans to vote online in national elections be productive and beneficial? Well, it this idea that there are obstacles in the way and that these obstacles may have been established by a specific party for a reason, that could be an interesting idea, an interesting nugget to then incorporate into the argument about voting, the idea of Americans voting online. So we know this, of course, because of the color red and the symbol of the elephant, because they are longstanding symbols of the Republican Party. Um, so some questions here, right? Would being able to vote online help to address some of the things that could get in the way of Americans voting? Would an online system help to reduce the opportunities for specific political parties or legislatures to interfere with the voting process or create obstacles to people voting? Or maybe it could create more. Maybe an online voting system would actually create more obstacles for people or create more opportunities for more people who want fewer lower income people of color to vote, to actually implement though more obstacles to achieve that, in my opinion, unsavory end. Alrighty, next example, same deal. This is a slightly more complex visual source. We got more going on here. So our prompt, right? Under what circumstances, if ever, should a society revisit the memorialization of individuals, including their names and likenesses, Jordan, in the public sphere? This is some text that would precede the source. You can read that, then look at the source, pause the video, fill out the chart, at least 3 bullets on each side minimum. I'm pretty sure I've got more than that. Alrighty, so let's look at these here. I started with the most obvious things, right? All 3 bills share a lot of features. Placements of things have changed slightly over the years. If I had more space, I might have gone into this, right? You've got the fact that the number 20 shows up in 3 or 4 places in all the bills. You've got some seals, not the ocean kind, the government kind. You've got uh, United States of America, reference to the Federal Reserve, the words $20, picture in the middle, the same like, series number, bill numbers, right? All looks very formal, security measures, etc. The key difference between all the bills is the person in the middle. In the first 2 bills, the person in the middle is Andrew Jackson. They tell us that right there at the bottom of each image. It's in tiny letters, but it's there. He was the 7th president of the United States. He, in the last bill, the person pictured, though, is Harriet Tubman. It's important, or I think it's important to note here that Andrew Jackson is a white man. Harriet Tubman is African American. The images make that obvious. The notes clearly indicate that the last bill is not yet in circulation. It says right above, like, one artist's rendition of a proposed future $20 bill. So not only is it not in circulation or not something that's actually real yet, but it's only one possibility done by one artist. So it's not even like the actual bill being proposed. It's just an idea. So for the implicit side, this was challenging, right? This was challenging even for me when I was putting this together. I'm interested to see what you came up with, though. Why do American currency notes change so little? Right? Maybe because they're a symbol of a nation's economic power, maybe for logistical concerns, for security concerns, some questions like why, this is over 100 years, nearly 100 years, that the general design of these bills has changed fairly little. It's also important to know, you could bring in your history knowledge here. The Andrew Jackson's legacy is controversial, right? He is known for having enslaved approximately 160 people over his lifetime. The fact that he enslaved people enriched him. He was known for brutal punishments for slaves who disobeyed him at the Hermitage. And this is really the claim of value here, right? It feels wrong. It's wrong. It feels bad to memorialize him and look at him on our money, on our $20 bill, which I think is actually the most frequently used bill in our everyday lives, for cash transactions, is the 20. It's everywhere, right? And so that feels a little bit weird, especially when one comes to this source knowing the history behind him and who he was and what he did. I also think it's important to note here, right? Harriet Tubman would be the first African American person and the first woman to appear on American currency if a proposal to include her on the bill were accepted. This addition would better reflect the U.S. population. It would honor an important historical figure. I think there's an implicit idea here that this is a good idea. That this is that there's sort of a contrast between the old and the new, the dated and the modern, the old way of looking at things, the new way of looking at things. There's really a lot going on here that you could unpack if you had more time and space on your paper. So something else to think about here, right? What reasons exist for and against adopting the new bill? So if you have these images, it would be interesting then to bounce this off other sources that might present ideas for and against adopting the new bill, or maybe something more generally, sources for and against moving away from long-standing tradition and toward the toward newer images that represent our current society. And I think that idea, as well as the idea of the idea that it might be wrong to memorialize Jackson, those two together would be what you can pull out of this source to contribute to an argument in response to the prompt about revisiting the memorialization of people in the public sphere. Third example, we're now getting into some quantitative sources. So same deal here. You've got a fictional prompt. It's about video games. And you've got the text preceding the source, which is kind of long. And you've got the source. Please note there's a little word there, your children, with an optional were that's necessary for one of the prompts. So look closely, zoom in if you have to, pause the video, fill out your chart the best you can. 3 dots or 3 bullets on each side minimum. Alrighty, so please note that OTPS means of the parents surveyed. I abbreviated that because I wanted to take up less space. So for the data, the way you deal with data in these visual sources is by pulling out numbers and then putting them in sentences that state what the data says explicitly, objectively, but in words. And it is important you do this correctly. You might need to practice a little bit if you're not used to doing, making this kind of move. But once you practice a little bit, you'll be fine. So 40% of the male children of the parents surveyed sometimes skipped household chores to game. 26% of female children did. So 29% of male children of the parents surveyed sometimes skipped homework to game. 15% of female children did. 26% of male children have done poorly on a school assignment or test, due to game time. 11% of female children have. 17 and 10%, respectively, have lied about playtime. 3% and 1% have stolen. What is the prompt there? Have stolen a game or money to buy a game. 2%, 1% have been restless or irritable, respectively, when ceasing gaming, when trying to stop playing games. So the largest percentage on the chart is 40%, and there are no numbers, only percentages on the chart. So implicit side, right? And I also want to point out here, in case this wasn't already clear, what I'm trying to do, it's not perfect. It's hard to make it perfect, but what I'm trying to do here is take what's on the implicit side and connect it directly to what's going on the explicit side. So the implicit and explicit parts of the chart have some kind of linear relationship. Like you can look across and see see what the relationship is between ideas. Sometimes it's not going to line up perfectly because of the way the spacing works, but that's the idea. Try to do that insofar as you can. So it does seem like, based on these data, boys are more likely to prioritize gaming over duties or responsibilities of all kinds, duties and responsibilities to self and to community, than girls are. Why is an interesting question. Long-term consequences of that, like what are those? That's an interesting thing to think about. This is a great opportunity to connect to another source of some kind, right? There must be in a prompt about, about restricting access to video games. There have got to be more sources about what the consequences of excessive playing of video games or all these other things that teenagers might do who have an unhealthy relationship with video games. Like those, there's other sources would be essential for you to be able to make this argument, and so you have this nice way to hyperlink between one source and another. The differences between boys and girls are smaller in the cases of the more egregious gaming related behaviors. So if you look at the things that, you've really got a subjective judgment here going on, where some of these, in my opinion, as the person looking at this, are worse than others. You did poorly on a test or didn't do well on homework because you were playing games. Yeah, that's not very good. But stealing game or stealing money to buy a game, that's much worse. That's magnitudes worse. On my moral compass. So the uh, and it seems interesting that on those that I think most people would agree are worse, the difference between boys and girls is smaller. The Also, the numbers for stealing and for mental health concerns arising from gaming. So again, the more egregious parts are some of the smallest on the chart. That does suggest that these behaviors are not a widespread concern, right? If a lot of parents were surveyed here, and the biggest number was 40%, and the most concerning behaviors were very very small percentages of the parents surveyed. They that really does say something. Maybe those behaviors are not. Maybe it's not even the video games causing them. Correlation is not causation. So maybe there's something else that's just associated with the video games that's actually causing those numbers to be the way they are. Confounding variables. So um, Also, I want to point out this goes with the 40%, as being the biggest number. It's possible, in fact, it's likely that many of the parents surveyed said, "My child plays video games, but has done none of these things ever." Right? Like, there, if the biggest number were 90%, well, that's a different story. But I think it's a reasonable conclusion to jump to that at least some of the survey respondents just had had none. Um, so I also want to point out the N, that is the total raw number for girls and boys, could be radically different. We don't actually know. It's like 29% of the boys, 26% of the boys, 13% of the boys. And those same numbers, 15, 11, and 4% for the girls. But we don't know if the number of girls or the number of boys was really different. So if there were a lot of boys and few girls actually being surveyed or being considered in the survey, the kids weren't being surveyed, obviously, but if the parents were had more male children than female children when taking this survey, that could really skew the data. So I would just say that in an argument about whether video games should be restricted for teenagers, the focus the focus should be on all kids, and the division of the data by gender is not really that interesting or worth uh, talking a whole lot about, unless there are other sources to support a gendered relationship to video games. All right. So last practice source here. Go ahead and read the prompt, read the text preceding the source. There's the source. Fill out the diagram. Alrighty. So, some explicit things. The percent of respondents who were on the favor and opposed side were very close overall, 40% to 43%. The difference is only 3%. So 3% more would oppose UBI, or were on the red side than were on the green side overall. 18% of respondents were unsure. I thought that was kind of interesting. That seems like kind of a lot, when looking at surveys like this. A lot of political surveys give an unsure option, but very few people generally choose it, especially when considering, a question that is so fundamental like the UBI, or so polarizing, I guess I should say. Also, 52% of people earning less than 30K a year favored the UBI model, 23% opposed, 58% making between 30K and 49K a year favored it, while 32% opposed, and so on and so forth. 21% favored and 61% opposed when we're talking about people who made $125,000 a year or more per year. So you can always abbreviate that data. You can, when you're taking the actual exam, you'll need to be doing this really heckin' fast. So you won't be writing this many words, but you can still capture the ideas. So I would argue that the fact that of all the respondents who had a perspective who weren't unsure, the data was about even. This seems to suggest that the issue is controversial and divisive. There's not widespread agreement about whether the UBI should even exist, let alone how it should look. So, like, what the consideration should be when implementing one? Well, maybe one of the considerations should be a lot of people don't even think it's a good idea. So, and therefore, this is how one should respond to that fact. Again, the orange refers to parts of what's going on in the implicit side that plug directly back into the original prompt at the top of the page. So it's possible that just a lot of people don't know much about UBI. That maybe that's why so many people were saying unsure, like they just don't know what it means. Like it's a it's something that they're not sure about because they're not sure what it is. So when thinking about the considerations around universal basic income, one would need to think about the access and education, and like how those kinds of things, how citizens would learn about UBI, how to get it, what it is, how it can be used, you know, why they're getting it, that kind of thing. It seems like there's a correlation between income and perspective on UBI. Generally, it's the more money a person makes, the less likely they are to favor UBI. So, excuse me. They this would be an interesting place to connect to other sources, like why, what is the relationship? Why does there exist a relationship between uh, how much money a person makes and their perspective on a universal basic income? Could get to, like, you know, the fundamental ideas of income inequality and like, you know, our the modern money based caste system that exists in the United States, and a lot of other really, you know, deep ideas that our society is wrestling with. So it's likely that other sources on a topic like this would touch on the you know, the relationship between UBI approval and income. Alrighty, so when you get to class on Thursday or Friday, you're going to preview 6 more sources, like the 4 examples we just did today. You're going to do that really quickly. I'm going to have you put just one thing on each side of the EI diagram for each source. You're going to be practicing doing this kind of thing, as Emmy would say, really stinking fast. And then you're going to do a deep dive into one of those 6 sources as you complete a group activity. There will be a presentation involved. I want you to be ready for that. And you're going to show me that you're ready for that activity by turning in your notes from this lesson before class 37 begins. So please make sure you have those submitted to Schoology. The assignment is 35.2. Turn them in, please. Alrighty, that's all. Thank you.